Hi everybody, Kat here. Welcome to my channel. Well, it's early morning, Saturday, July 1st. For those of us here in Canada, that's Canada Day. Also, it is Princess Diana's birth date. Yep, today would have been her 62nd birthday. And I know she's on everybody's minds today that have an interest in the royal family, so I thought I would offer a little bit of a retrospective and my thoughts on things as we look back on Diana's life. One thing I find interesting when she died, what I've done is gone back and on YouTube and looked at the footage of the news footage from the time when the first announcements of the accident and they thought she was injured, right through to the news covers the announcement of her death, following news coverage of the public outpouring of love and all the flowers and just thousands of people on the streets and how everybody reacted to her death, the public and the royal family, and some things are quite interesting. And one thing that you notice right away when you look back at the news reports of her death, one of the first things that the political pundits are talking about is, should we have a privacy law because of course the official statement within an hour of the accident, the palace itself indeed came out and said, oh yeah, she died. There was, they were being chased by paparazzi. This was the official story from the get-go from the palace. That having been understood, the political pundits, the thing they were talking about is the proposed, this is going to demand a privacy law, for public figures, for, the press and how they operate and the paparazzi and putting limits on the press and what they can do in pursuit of a story. And those of us that have been following these kind of things for decades understand that kind of a law is really a little baby step in totalitarianism towards control over what people see, what people can do, that kind of, it's a privacy law would end up actually where it looks good on one, they push it as one thing, but it really is another. And this is how they do things. But anyway, it was interesting to see at the time that this was the one thing that people were talking about. Will this mean a privacy law? Should we do this? How do we do this? That kind of a thing. And I just find it very interesting that 26 years later, this is still being debated in the courts of law in Britain with the phone hacking scandal, which really, that Harry's involved in. Of course, he's got no evidence. There's others involved. The fact that it's still going on shows that there is an agenda behind everything to actually, put something like that in, because in the long run and in the unwritten code of the law, there will be something in there that's going to restrict some kind of public rights, no doubt. Control of the press. I mean, we're seeing this here in Canada right now. We just had a law passed and that And it was under the guise of, oh, Canadian content, like even our TV channels have to be a certain amount of Canadian content, and then you get the American stuff and, you know, and all of that. But what Trudeau has done here was introduced a bill, and it just passed, that news agents like Google, Yahoo, I suppose, any news agent will now have to pay to put their content on, you know, Canadian websites, the Canadian arm of the internet, our internet providers. So they're going to have to pay to put their news content. So they've all refused and said, no, we're not gonna do that. So as a result, what it has done was limit the amount of international news from varied sources coming into Canada and being available on the internet here in Canada. So what Trudeau has done and his government has done with this law is, in effect, limit the amount of news, limit what Canadians can see, limit where they get their news from, limit the sources, limit information. And this is the kind of thing that they've been debating in Britain for years and years and years. And isn't it ironic, 26 years later, Harry's in court fighting this exact thing. Not going real well for him, but that's that. And another thing that they were talking about during this time, the aftermath of her death, you know, within hours and days, and the coverage was nonstop, 24/7 for a week, you know, till her funeral. But they were saying, you know, is she going to be basically canonized by the people? Because everybody was shocked at the outpouring of emotion, the public's response to her death, people weeping in the streets. And Brits basic, you know, they have that stiff upper lip, quiet desperation kind of, and you don't show your emotions, you don't have public displays of emotion, and that all went out the window. People were weeping in the streets, laying flowers, mountains, miles of flowers, thousands of people on the streets. It's something nobody had ever seen before. So they were talking, you know, is what's going to happen? What's her memory going to be? What's her legacy going to be? At the time, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, whom she had befriended and I think she'd had a couple of meetings with him. He'd only been Prime Minister for a matter of months when she died. But she had wanted to get some government support for some of the work she was doing and, you know, wanted to set herself up as an ambassador for Britain. And so she had befriended Tony Blair, and he had a lot of admiration for her. But, you know, so like 3 or 4 months into the job, he had to stand up and basically give a statement when she died. And he said, you know, she'll always remain in our hearts. We will remember her as the Queen of People's Hearts, and that's how we know her now, and that's how it'll always be. And, you know, people were concerned that, you know, are we gonna, you know, almost make her a saint, a mythical kind of worship for her. And thankfully, that didn't really happen. I mean, while she was alive, she was forthright and honest, and we knew her fallibilities. We knew the affairs. We knew the eating disorder, the bad marriage, the breakdown of the marriage, her horrible family life. I mean, the fact that she you know, didn't have a lot of friends, because who can, you know, how can you be a friend to somebody that's so above you, locked in an ivory tower? You can't just go out for coffee with Princess Diana. You know, even people that that worked with her in their charities and things like this, patrons of hers that, you know, would escort her here and there to different events, there was friendliness. But one of them said, you know, you couldn't, and this is a guy that had worked with her and known her for 10 years, said you can't just invite the Princess of Wales out for dinner, you know, even though she's like the loneliest person on the planet. I think what's happened over the course of 26 years, we understand now what, you know, everybody at the time was saying, oh, she's paranoid and she's this and that and everything. Well, now we know the background about what Charles and Camilla were gaslighting her. We understand Martin Bashir in BBC, the Panorama interview, was gaslighting her. There wasn't a lot of people around her she could trust. Therefore, her paranoia and all of that was justified. She was right. And we know this now. She is absolutely admired for some of the groundbreaking work she did in the 80s, at the time when AIDS reared its ugly head. Everybody was terrified. She came out, that picture of her sitting on the side of the bed, shaking the hand of the AIDS patient, went around the world, not just because it was Diana and what dress is she wearing. She actually broke a barrier that changed the course of the treatment of people with AIDS. I mean, absolutely. You know, she did some amazing work. The work she did with landmines, even though it upset a lot of people in the government and lawmakers and stuff like this. She did anger a lot of people. But again, groundbreaking work, and she was strong enough to do it. There was a lot of things she did in private, even after she kind of stepped down and limited her public engagements. She still worked behind the scenes a lot of the time, things that were never photographed, things that were never talked about. She did engage with the public and people that she did meet along the way and stuff. She maintained personal relationships and wrote them letters and saw them privately. She actually did care, which is something that we can debate about the royal family, how much of it actually is genuine, because her actions stood far above anybody else's at the time, and really since, to be honest with you. Her death gave us real insight into the royal family as a whole, as an institution. The Queen misjudged the public. The Queen, because Diana was no longer HRH, she was divorced and out of the way, the Queen didn't regard her as important, and I think the Queen was absolutely shocked at the reaction of the public. And I don't think she liked it. You know, even in death, Diana could outshine her. The people came out like never before, never in history. The public reaction was so strong that when the Queen had to, after 4 days, it took her 4 days to make a statement. And her advisors told her, you know, the tide is turning. People are angry at you now. They're not just sad about Diana, they're angry at you now, have to say something. And when she came out and she did the statement and she goes, she starts it out, as your queen and as a grandmother, the as your queen, she is saying, you might be all broken up over Diana and everybody's out in the streets because she died, but I'm your queen. Don't forget that I'm your queen. And one of her royal advisors, to soften the tone, basically said and a grandmother. He put that line in. She wasn't gonna. She was just gonna say, I'm your queen. Listen to me. And she went on, she never said she loved Diana. She said she respected and admired her for the work that she had done and her devotion to her two boys. But it was all about, don't forget, you might be mourning Diana, don't forget I'm your queen. And we know, and there's been things all along, how the different members of the royal family don't like being upstaged by somebody lesser than. Charles was like this with Diana. He did not like to be upstaged by her. The Queen did not like to be upstaged by her. The first time Diana was invited to the opening of Parliament very early in her marriage for that particular day, and I mean, she was all in a fancy gown and tiara and the whole thing. Her hair was a little bit longer then, about maybe here or something. And for this particular day, she upturned the back of her hair and kind of rolled it into the back, in a roll in the back. I mean, new hairstyle for Diana. Opening of Parliament, huge event in British life. The Queen wasn't the big story. The big story was Diana's hairdo, and that was all the pictures. And Princess Margaret and the Queen, Princess Margaret said to Diana, don't you ever upstage the Queen again. So there was real sort of competition, and I mean, we hear about these things now. Harry has said it, how there's competition here and there. But, and I've said before, a lot of times, Harry's not wrong, but it's the way he goes about saying things and the fact that he's half crazy anyway, that nobody's going to really take anything he says seriously. But they do. And even recently, when William did his speech regarding his commitment to ending homelessness in 5 years, he recognized his mother's work on homelessness and how she had originally, when he was 12 years old, started taking him to shelters and charities that dealt with homelessness, so he would have an idea of what was going on. He mentioned her. He didn't mention the work that Charles has done over the years on homelessness. So, complete diss of Charles. And again, this is one thing I've said before in videos specifically. William makes his move. William is starting to consolidate his power, starting to show his power. He's starting to move into a position of dominance even over his father. So things with the royal family remain very dynamic. And not much really has changed since Diana's time. The one thing that time and reflection has done for the public is more and more people are looking at her life and times when she was alive and her time with the royal family, and realizing exactly how she was treated, realizing exactly the things that Charles and Camilla did do. They're realizing that circumstances surrounding her death may have not been quite exactly the way the official narrative still is pushed forward. People are starting to question a lot of things. As far as Diana personally, she is respected. She is admired. She is loved still by people. She is understood a lot better. Now that we know what was really going on in her life at the time, you know, we can understand. We respected her for being honest at the time. She was, you know, said, hey, I've had affairs. Yes. Hey, I've had eating disorders. Yes. Hey, I've been depressed. Yes. I've been, you know, there's all kinds of people out of my control just fucking with my life, and I'm just trying to survive. And now we understand that. So I think the respect for her has grown. She is a legend that's never going to die. She will be in the history books. I think she made a huge contribution to the royal family. She really put them on the map. She was an absolutely one of the most influential figures of her time. And we can look back on that in a familiar kind of way. And, you know, be happy that she was here for some time. She was a person that, you know, good or bad and all her failings, she did make a huge impact on her life and time. So there you go. July 1st. Happy birthday. Everybody take care. Have a great day. Like, subscribe, share, and send me a comment. I'd like to know what you think. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.